What the hell's driving the massive immigration into the West? Because we see it in Canada, maybe worse than anywhere else at the moment, or at a more rapid rate than anywhere else. Canada is so damn peaceful, it's hard to destabilize it, but we're working hard on that. So what's driving this, Matt? Is it the insistence? Is it this ideological insistence?
It's a lot of things. The one is, as I've warned about for a long time, one is something that isn't inevitable, but is hard to resist, which is the simple ease of movement in the 21st century, the relative cheapness of travel compared to any previous century, and the knowledge through the devices we have in our pockets around the globe. I mean, 3 billion people are on WhatsApp alone. The ability of people anywhere in the world to discover the life of anyone else in the world easily. And add to that the fact that most countries in the world are not even remotely approximating either the safety or the wealth available in 21st century Canada, for instance, or Britain. And it's inevitable that a lot of people will want that. Now, as I've said for years, just because they may want it does not mean that Western liberal democracies can remotely be the place where everybody who wants a better life can or should go. It's simply impossible.
The surge in immigration to the West, particularly in Canada, is largely fueled by the ease of global movement and the vast disparities in safety and wealth between developed nations and many other regions of the world. While the desire for a better life is understandable, the sheer volume of migrants creates significant challenges, making it impractical for Western countries to accommodate everyone seeking refuge or opportunity. This dynamic raises important questions about integration, social cohesion, and the limits of humanitarian efforts in the face of overwhelming demand. Murray believes that large-scale immigration, especially from countries with significantly different cultural, religious, and social values, can lead to a breakdown in social cohesion. He argues that Western nations have been historically successful because of shared values and principles, and when those are diluted through mass immigration, without proper integration, it can lead to societal fragmentation. In Canada, for instance, he would point to the difficulty of maintaining unity in a highly multicultural society that doesn't emphasize integration. Murray links the current migration trend to globalization, noting that technological advances and ease of travel have made it simpler for people to move to wealthier countries like Canada, Europe, and the US. He argues that while economic disparities drive migration, it is not feasible for everyone from poorer or conflict-ridden regions to migrate to the West. He emphasizes the need for strong integration policies to prevent tensions between newcomers and host societies, especially in multicultural countries like Canada. Murray also argues that some left-wing politicians use immigration as a political tool, stifling debate by labeling critics as racist or xenophobic. Murray has pointed out that Canada, under leaders like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has embraced one of the most liberal immigration policies in the world. He argues that, while this has earned Canada a reputation as a welcoming country, it also poses risks if the country does not prioritize the integration of new arrivals and maintain control over its borders. He may also argue that Canada's immigration policies could lead to similar issues that Europe is facing, such as the rise of populism, increased political polarization, and the potential for social unrest.
Simply impossible. And you just crunch the numbers on people in sub-Saharan Africa who want to move into Europe, for instance. And if that happened, if the third of sub-Saharan Africa who want to move moved, Europe would be totally unrecognizable. Now, the second thing that comes from that is that it is extremely difficult for politicians to maintain their borders. And I think this is highly regrettable, because I think the only way in which, among other things, you can have an actual asylum system where you actually take in those unusual cases where asylum should be needed, just disappear once you have illegal migration every day coming in on boats, or as in the case of America, millions of people walking across the southern border in the last 4 years. And add to that the fact that as was famously said in 1968 by somebody, it's the easiest thing to put off any difficult decision you have to make today and leave it for your successors to address. All the time making it harder for your successors. But I said this to a European politician some years ago when they said that they were going to deport the 1 million illegals that were in their country. I said, how are you going to do it? Because you and I know that on day one, if you rounded up everyone who is legally in the country and put them on buses, trains, boats, the first woman or child crying would be on the front page of every newspaper the next morning. And by day two, you would have to stop because of public pressure. It seems to be a reality for the time being. By the way, until such a time emerges, and it could, where the society says we don't give a damn anymore. We don't give a damn. That may well happen. But until that does happen, countries are absolutely incapable, politicians are incapable of answering this question. Then you have
Murray stresses that migration from sub-Saharan Africa is vast, driven by economic disparities and instability, and that Europe cannot accommodate these numbers without serious consequences. Many migrants are seeking better opportunities rather than fleeing war, complicating the asylum process. He argues that European borders are overwhelmed, especially across the Mediterranean, leading to a breakdown in control and exploitation by human traffickers. Murray also highlights that mixing economic migrants with genuine asylum seekers undermines the integrity of asylum systems, making it harder to offer refuge to those in need and fueling public resentment. Murray warns that mass migration could lead to demographic and cultural shifts in Europe, causing social fragmentation as different groups struggle to integrate. Without effective integration, parallel communities may form, leading to tensions and a loss of shared values. He also highlights the economic strain uncontrolled migration places on housing, healthcare, and social services in countries already facing high unemployment and debt, which can fuel resentment among citizens who feel migrants are being prioritized.
European nations, Britain, are not based on an idea. They were not based on an idea. Now, that isn't to say that they don't have very distinct cultures. And my word, the different cultures across Europe are so different that everyone jokes about their neighbors and regards their neighbor in the neighboring European country being wildly different from them. To an outsider, it seems preposterous that the Swedes and the Norwegians would have distinctions between them, but they do. But I say this to say that Europe and Britain was made up of ethnic identities. And those ethnic identities had ideas, of course. But even in Britain, you have the Welsh, you have the Scots, you have the English, the Northern Irish, the Irish. How do you integrate into that? How do you do it? Does anyone know? And the answer is no. Have some people? I'd say yes. Have a majority? It doesn't look that way to me. And so this is just a bomb underneath the societies in Europe in particular. It has been about ethnicity. We don't like things about being about ethnicity.
Douglas Murray's perspective on Europe's integration challenges is tied to his broader concerns about mass immigration and its long-term effects on European societies. He believes that Europe's increasingly diverse ethnic makeup, driven by migration from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, has led to profound challenges in maintaining social cohesion and unity. Murray argues that Europe's integration problems largely arise from cultural differences between migrants and native Europeans, particularly on issues like women's rights, freedom of expression, and religious tolerance. These differences, he contends, make it difficult for some migrants to fully integrate. He's also concerned that increasing ethnic and cultural diversity erodes national identity, weakening the social fabric that traditionally unites European societies. For Murray, preserving national identity is essential for social cohesion, and he believes current immigration policies undermine this goal. Murray criticizes the multiculturalism model adopted by many European countries, arguing that it promotes separate communities rather than assimilation or integration. This, he believes, creates parallel societies, with different values, undermining a shared national identity and fueling social tensions. He contends that rising ethnic and cultural diversity has led to social fragmentation, where groups form isolated enclaves. Without shared values or identity, maintaining unity and social order becomes difficult, leading to competition for resources and increasing resentment between communities.
So we say it's about an idea, but all my adult life, this idea has been so hard for anyone to pin down that they've just failed at it time and time again. I'm old enough to remember when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and I contributed to a book that he edited about being British, what Britishness was. That was 20 years ago. And Britain is no closer to defining that today than it was 20 years ago. People say things like Britishness is about queuing or fair play. And that is so completely inadequate to the task at hand. But the other one that can come along with this, and this is one of the ones that white working class communities in the UK deeply resent in particular, is the you don't have a culture. Which is one of the other nice, it's one of the nice things that race baiters of all shapes have been doing for years at these people. You don't have a culture. It's what I wrote about in The War on the West, the jabbing at majority populations. And if you do have a culture, it's not a good one, or it's a rapaciously evil one, or it's one that's only to be described through the lens of colonialism or slavery or racism or institutional racism or patriarchy or whatever. And they've just done this for years. There has been what I showed in my last book to be this, for instance, why do all the holy places of the British people keep being attacked, literally and metaphorically? Why does Winston Churchill, the great hero of the British nation, keep on being attacked by people? Because they want to hurt these people. They want to hurt the people who revere them. They literally want to strip their gods from them. They want to defile the holy places of the culture. You might say, well, why do you want to do that? Revenge for some people, supremacy of a different kind for others, weakness among others, false adventure, cowardice, going along with the tenor of the times, however bad that direction of travel happens to be. But I said recently, before these riots happened, I said, it would be, and I might have said this to you in private before, Jordan, but I said it would be madness if people from the Indian subcontinent made up 3% of your population, it would be madness to try to demoralize that population or to try to find ways to just say that they were nothing and never had been anything, and it was sort of best if they just tried to sidle through their lives without harming anyone.
Murray believes Britishness is hard to define due to its complex history and evolving identity. Once rooted in imperialism, class, and Protestantism, British identity has become more ambiguous with increasing diversity and multiculturalism. He argues this shift has left many, particularly the white working class, feeling disconnected and uncertain about their place in modern Britain. Murray suggests that political elites prioritize diversity, often overlooking the concerns of the white working class, who feel their traditional values and national pride are being undermined. These communities are sometimes labeled as intolerant for wanting to preserve their version of Britishness. Murray argues that Britain's historical sense of national pride has diminished in recent years, in part due to a shift in how the country views its own history. The emphasis on the negative aspects of British history, such as imperialism and colonialism, has led to a sense of guilt that undermines national pride. For Murray, this is problematic because a nation needs a positive sense of its past to maintain a cohesive identity. He contends that white working-class communities, who often have a more positive view of Britain's history, feel marginalized by this shift and are increasingly disconnected from modern British identity. Murray often links the attacks on British historical figures to broader modern movements, such as identity politics, post-colonial theory, and movements like Black Lives Matter. While these movements address legitimate concerns about inequality and historical injustice, Murray argues that they have often been co-opted by radical elements seeking to dismantle Western heritage altogether. He points out that Churchill's legacy was attacked during protests that focused on systemic racism, and statues of other historical figures were defaced or removed in the name of social justice. Murray contends that these actions go beyond necessary historical critique and instead aim to erase important aspects of British identity. Murray argues that the criticism of figures like Winston Churchill represents a form of historical revisionism aimed at distorting or selectively retelling Britain's past. He believes that while no historical figure is without flaws, reducing complex individuals like Churchill to solely their perceived negative traits distorts their contributions to the country and the world. Churchill, for instance, is often attacked for his views on empire and race, while his leadership during World War IE is downplayed. Murray contends that this rewriting of history seeks to damage the nation's sense of pride in its past achievements. Murray acknowledges that Britain's increasing diversity makes it more difficult to define a single national identity. However, he argues that there must still be a core set of values that bind people together as British citizens. Without these shared values, he warns that Britain risks becoming a collection of isolated communities with little in common. Murray calls for a more assertive approach to defining Britishness, one that includes respect for British history, culture, and values, while also accommodating the contributions of immigrants and minority communities. Murray's defense of British heritage is part of a broader defense of Western civilization as a whole. He believes that the attacks on British figures are similar to the efforts to undermine historical figures in other Western countries, such as the United States. For Murray, this represents an attack on the shared values of the West: freedom, democracy, and individual rights. He argues that defending British symbols like Churchill is also about defending the broader legacy of Western civilization and its contributions to the world. Murray proposes several solutions to Europe's integration challenges. He calls for tighter regulations to prevent overwhelming the system. Murray urges governments to prioritize integration, promoting cultural assimilation over multiculturalism. He suggests reforming welfare to reduce dependency and encourage economic participation among migrants. Murray advocates for helping migrants' home countries develop, reducing the pressures that drive migration. Thanks for watching.